Hello, everyone, and welcome back. As you probably know, since you're here, I'm RJ Kerr, and welcome to Let's Write Adventure. This is our weekly live stream where we are writing a D&D adventure in real time. If you're just joining us for the very first time, we are currently working on the adventure that we brainstormed in part one of this series, where the characters are hired by a community leader at a town that we now know as Sky Song Gulch to recover the only known deposit of our MacGuffin, cold iron, which was once mined and held in a abandoned glacial fortress slash mine that we're calling the Berg, that was abandoned because it was ravaged by disease. The community needs it to save themselves from the foretold coming of the Bloodgood Sisters' coven of hags, and led to believe that the village plans to fight these powerful fae. The characters go to recover the cold iron, but when they return with it, they discover the village actually intends to pay off the hags with this, uh, thus completing an ancient pact. The party then has to decide whether to support empowering the hags with this powerful face slaying cold iron, or to convince the community to fight back, knowing there's going to be consequences no matter what they do. So, last time we were working on the BBEG, the climax of this adventure, and dealing with sort of the the decision that the party has to make at the very end, um, where let's go and swap to my share screen here, where they have a choice of either just kind of turning over the cold iron and going, you know what, your town, your problem, not dealing with any hags, and moving on, or more probably trying to convince the town not to give the cold iron to the hags, to stand up against them. Um, and we were building out some of the mechanics to do so, using not really a skill challenge model, but more of a progress clock kind of challenge, where the characters uh, can go and talk to community leaders within within Skysong Gulch, important NPCs that we have yet to define, and if they can convince six of them before they frighten four of them, they'll convince the town to rise up and assist them. If they frighten these NPCs, not just fail the result, not just fail their checks to persuade them, but actually scare them, failing by five or more. Um, well, scaring four of them with a check failing by five or more is what I mean. Then the town might actually decide to side with the hags instead. So we built some of that out, and we're kind of in a place here where really we could run this BBEG encounter um, mechanically. This is still going to benefit from a map, and there are things we could still fill out. You know, for example, the NPCs here, who the party has to go convince. That's worth coming up with ahead of time. Although you could make it up on the spot, it just it makes it a little easier for you if you know you're going to need these people to at least give them names and occupations in the town, if not a little bit of personality. And then we're really don't need a clue list, but um, I'm not sure what else to call this yet. Where it's they come back to town, there's visual clues that uh, or experiential clues that the town means to turn over the cold iron to the hags as opposed to using it to fight them. Um, and so it's worthwhile to kind of fill in some of this ahead of time, but it's not necessarily necessary. And considering this is likely going to take your group more than one session of play, you could get started without filling this out. Although let's go ahead and put a name here. Let's put Sky Song Gulch. Cool. Um, so we're getting pretty close. We're in the home stretch here. We're getting pretty close to having an adventure that's ready to play. Not necessarily ready to publish, but ready to play. Um, so we need to fill in a few things still. Specifically, we really need to kind of finish up sketching out some of the details of the Berg, specifically the font of magic, kind of magical interaction stuff, which that's what we're gonna do today. And then we got a whole bunch of rooms that need something in them. encounters or otherwise. Um, but we've got the key points here filled out. We need maps for some of this stuff, not everything, but some of this stuff. And then we also need to really kind of sketch out the entry here. A little bit of sensory details about Skysong Gulch, a little bit more about how they get the quest, and we need to give ourselves a hand here by adding a little bit of read to players text, box text, if you will, that uh, helps us get the ball rolling. So we don't just sit down and all the players look at us and we go, "Oh crap! I didn't think about how to actually start this adventure." Get the ball rolling. Script yourself out something to say here. So we will benefit from doing that. Um, but yeah, I think we're starting to really look good here and shape up. Um, even if it doesn't look like it in a glance here. So today we're going to work on this font of magic bit here, and then we may start filling out the reward section. What do the characters stand to win in this? Um, More towards the end, at the completion here. We'll talk a little bit about sprinkling some treasure in here because we really don't have any of that yet. And then if there's time, we'll start filling in some of the gaps at the Berg here, because that's probably the most pressing bit after those other two that are outstanding. And then I think either next week or the week after, depending how far we get today, um, we'll we'll probably get into drawing some maps. So we'll live stream how to do that here. Obviously, probably using the Krita software for that. We'll get more on that when we get closer. So let's start off with our font of magic. So as you know, I don't work on any of this outside of our time here together on the stream, so that you can see all of the nuts and bolts. Hear all of my rambling, disjointed thought process that goes into this. Um, but I have given this a little bit of thought. I haven't really done a lot of digging into this, but I've given it a little thought. So there is there's a number of resources that we can use for this. I will give the disclaimer that in general, I do not like to muck with, nerf, handicap, um, you know, hobble, whatever you want to call it, um, the abilities of any one particular class in an adventure. Um, if you do that too often, it one makes a very negative experience for the characters, for the players playing those characters, or it tells your party that you just shouldn't, your players, they just shouldn't be playing those classes, because your games are balanced to make it really difficult for those kinds of characters. That being said, every once in a while, it's fine. And every once in a while, it can actually be really fun because it adds just a little bit of extra thought here. But it means that what we want to do is we don't want to make it so the players are just absolutely terrified to use magic at all. We want we want to set up a situation where most of the time it's going to be fine, but every once in a while it's going to go wonky on them. So, right off the top of the head here, there are a couple resources that we can use. The obvious one is to come over to the player's handbook here, to go to our sorcerer, jump down to Sorcerer's Origins and Wild Magic, and use the Wild Magic Surge rules. And the rule here for that is that effectively, at the DM's discretion, anytime a sorcerer, a wild magic sorcerer, in this case we'd say any magic user, casts a level 1 spell or above, they roll a d20. On a 1, a wild magic surge happens. And that means that about 5% of the time you're going to get a wild magic surge, which is actually probably pretty good, a pretty good frequency for what we're going for here. The problem comes when we look at the table. Lots of options here, which is good. 50 different choices and effects that could happen. But we get a few things that are like there's a chance that it's a 2% chance, so it's not huge. That's a 2% chance on top of the only 5% chance to have anything here happen. But they do things like cast fireball on themselves, right? And this is a group of third level characters. So fireball spell is going to do 8d6 fire damage, right? So if we're at all thinking about this, we're going to say, we're going to figure out what the average damage is on that. So we come over here with our calculator. We know 8d6, so on a d8, to figure out what the average damage per d8 is going to be. Forgive me if you already know this, but we're going to go through this. It's going to be 8, which is the maximum you can roll on that die, plus 1, which is the lowest you can roll on that die. Gives us a 9. We divide that by 2. Average damage is going to be 4.5 damage. Now, in D&D, we round down, so if we were just figuring out the average damage for 1d8, we would round 4.5 down to 4, even though typically in math you'd round that up. Anyway, but in this case, we know that it's 6d8. Did I get that right, or did I back? I did that in the wrong order. 8d6, not 68. So let's try that again. Same process. 6 plus 1, right? Divided by 2. Man, okay, so 3.5. We're multiplying that by 8. Okay, so it's going to do on average 28 points of damage to anybody who fails that save, which is going to be, for the purposes of figuring this out, let's just assume that characters are going to fail that save. Now, if we think about our characters' third level character hit points, this puts us in a tricky situation, right? Because any spellcasters in the range here who aren't, say, clerics, are at a serious disadvantage, right? Because they've got d6 hit die, right? So in this case, if we've got an average level of hit points, that's going to be 6 hit points to start, plus, we already figured out that it's, what is it, 3.5 average for that. So it's 3.5 plus 3.5 for the next two levels, 3.5, right? So we're looking at an average hit point or average health of 13 hit points at third level. That's assuming no constitution modifiers, but even if they had a +3 to constitution, it's still only a +9. That puts us at 22, which means that on average, something like that's going to wipe out this character and a good chunk of your party potentially, especially if anybody's taking any damage. So that is potentially problematic because we don't want to create a situation where we might have a random TPK. Low odds, low probability, you might choose to risk it. Not a big deal if you do. Just be aware that it's a possibility and that it's really kind of unsatisfying if your player's in the middle of combat, you have them roll a wild magic surge, you roll the die, and all of a sudden, everybody's wiped out, everybody's dead, game over. We don't want that. I don't want to risk that. I am unlucky. That would happen to me. At least in die rolls, I am unlucky. So that would happen to me. So instead, we might check out another resource. In this case, that'd be Tasha's. And that comes over to our supernatural regions thing here, where we're going to come over to that. We're going to come down to unraveling magic. This is more balanced for kind of a region, which is really what we're dealing with here anyway. So rules for this one is that it triggers anytime charges are expended on a magical item, which is kind of cool. It means that it extends this to a consideration beyond just the spellcasters in our party potentially. And then spell slots at first level. And then, Dragon, Fey, or Elemental, but there's nothing of Challenge rating 5 or higher in this, so we're don't have to worry about that. But this gives us 20 other options here, meaning that you can either roll a percentage die, or you can just roll a d20 and number these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And these give you other effects that are a little less instant killy, if you will. They have some boons, they have some banes. They just add a level of chaos here, which frankly is really kind of what I'm looking for. So I think this is what we're going to go with for this. I think we're going to go ahead and use the rules here out of Tasha's. Now, full disclosure, um, you know, I've talked about in the past that I want to, you guys have been sitting with me through this whole thing. We've kind of written this whole deal together, and so I'll at the end of this series, I'll write it up, publish it, and everybody who's been watching this will get a copy, or can claim a copy. Since I don't know who you are, we'll put it in the description of the last video, right? Or we'll put it on the screen in the last video, one or the other. And so when I'm writing this for mass consumption, I would make up my own table for this because I don't want to require the DMs have Tasha's on top of the core rule books. But for yourself, there's nothing wrong with not reinventing the wheel, right? If you have this resource, there's no reason not to use it. And instead of making this more difficult on yourself. So in this case, we're just gonna, for our purposes for the moment, we're going to use this. So we're gonna come over to our font of magic here. So magical reactions, and let's say whenever one of the following criteria is met, roll a magical reaction is triggered. Roll on the, what was that, unraveling magic? Is that what that was? The unraveling magic effects table. Okay. Unraveling magic effects table. Make a little note to myself. Tasha's. Say roll once. And we copied the URL, so let's go ahead and link that for ourselves and make life easier. Cool. And then we'll just say the criteria are a spell of, let's see here, a creature casts a spell of first level or higher. A creature uses a charge from a magical item. Easy. So this has the effect of making this really mechanically easy for us to run as DMs. Very simple. One of these two criteria happens, and we roll on the table, and we just do what happens. Now, that being said, we didn't sit here and meticulously go through the table and say, oh, this, we have this effect, and this can be problematic here. And so you may end up running into a situation where something that's rolled just is super inconvenient. Fudge the dice. Pick something else if you're running it for yourself. That's going to be faster than sitting down and making this whole list from scratch for yourself. Of course, if you prefer to do that, absolutely you can do that. It's what I'll do before we publish this. But it does take exponentially longer. It's a lot easier to use the resources at hand. Cool. So that creates... so actually, one thing we should do here is, it's kind of assumed that this is happening anywhere within the Fortress of the Mind, but let's just spell it out. Whenever one of the following criteria is met, while the characters are within any area of the burg. Cool. So we know for ourselves, there's no wishy-washiness. It doesn't happen outside, it happens inside. It's not like they're standing out in front of it and they cast a spell and then this triggers it. Now that being said, we probably want to telegraph this to some degree to our characters. We want them to feel that there's something magically different about this place. And so what we may choose to do here is put a little note about that within one of the first places of the burg that the characters enter. So the ramp is technically outside, but we have it marked, right? So um, that means that we could argue that it counts as part of the burg. Maybe spell effects don't happen here, but maybe they can feel kind of the edge of it. So I might, put a call out here. I say call out. This is my box text for this, right? So it's worthwhile to give ourselves a little bit of description at the very beginning too, to help kind of set the stage, help set the scene. Um, in general, and this is my own personal experience here. You may have a different experience. You may have a different take on this, but I find that it's that starting things are the most difficult part of any adventure. Once the ball's rolling, it's easier to keep going because you have something to build off of, though. But when you're laying that foundation, when you're starting things out, it can be really easy in the heat of the moment to forget important details. So I tend to make sure that I'm writing box text for myself at the beginning of any crucial moment, or at any place where it'd be kind of a cut scene in my mind, where something that the characters see in the room or that space or that moment is going to be very important to how they decide to interact. We don't have to go, off the wall with this stuff. We don't have to write pages and pages, but a couple key sentences to prime the pump, as it were, to give them a sense of place and what's here, and to give them a little bit of pertinent information. Maybe not everything if we want them to explore and ask questions and dig in a little bit, but giving them a hint that something important is here. Sets them up for success, makes your job easier, and keeps you from having to go back and kind of retcon things in the middle of your game with the I forgot to mention, kind of stuff, which doesn't feel good to anybody. So let's give ourselves a little bit of flavor here. So we'll go back and edit this. Anytime you do a scene description, you're likely gonna go back and edit it because it's gonna be word vomit when it comes out initially. But let's word vomit for a minute here. So let's imagine our burg. They're in the wasteland, right? They're coming up the ramp. The winding switchbacking entrance to this towering citadel of ice. I don't imagine this as a citadel with spires. I think of it as a giant block, right? Like this elemental shape, geometric in a lot of ways. This monolithic structure in the middle of the desolation. So, okay, let's say switch backs wind up up this the lonely soaring face of this monolithic fortress. The burg is a solid wall of, we'll say the burg ahead of you is a solid, unfeeling wall of geometric ice jutting into the barren sky as an act of defiance against the desolation's arid terrain. Cool. So that kind of gives a little bit of a feel here. It's a little, like I said, word vomity, so we'll probably go back, fix that. But that gives us a little bit of Gets a little bit of sensory detail here, focusing again on the senses and adding some emotions to this. One tip I will give you when you're writing descriptions is to think about how the experience is likely to make the characters feel. What is not just what do they see, taste, touch, smell, that kind of deal. All that's important, but how are they likely to feel about it? What mood does it put them in? And fortresses are designed to be imposing. So using words like defiance and desolation and solid, um, you know, soaring, these big words, well, not big words, but these big feelings associated with this give us a sense of strength, a sense of timelessness, a sense of stoicism that the fortress, that is the Berg, suggests to the characters. And so then the last thing we need to do here is our magic font. As you climb the exposed causeways, you feel here, the air crackles against your skin with a static buzz, as though some magical distortion infects this place. All right, so switchbacks wind up the lonely soaring face of this monolithic fortress. The Berg ahead of you is a solid, unfeeling wall of geometric ice jutting into the barren sky as an act of defiance against the desolation's arid terrain. God, that's a mouthful. As you climb the exposed causeway, the air crackles against your skin with a staticky buzz, as though some magical distortion infects this place. Okay, so that's enough in terms of description. Um, when we edit this, we will probably chop up the sentences a little bit here. One simple trick when you're writing for things for your for your players to hear that you're going to read verbatim to them. Um, Shorter sentences without subordinate clauses are easier to digest, right? So a subordinate clause is things like the soaring face of the monolithic fortress, or the jutting into the sky as an act of defiance against the desolation's arid terrain, right? So adding these things in, tacking these things on the end of a sentence makes it more difficult to understand when it's when you read it or when you hear it, especially when you hear it. So when we go back and we edit this, I will likely keep the subordinate clause here because it'll add a little bit of variation, but I'll probably break up this beast of a sentence into two, maybe even three, probably two, just so that when I read this out to my players, they're not trying to decipher the meaning, while I'm already moving on to the next bit here. I want to make this as easy for them to digest as possible. That being said, I'm gonna resist the urge to go back and edit that now. One of my rules of thumb on editing is that I don't edit on the same day that I draft. So what we're doing right now is drafting. So we're just kind of putting all this stuff on here, and that's a very different headspace than editing. So at the barest minimum, I will write all this out, and even no matter how quickly it goes down, I will take at least 24 hours before I go and read through it again to edit it, so that I can be in a completely different mindset. I can get a little distance from that, and I'll see things that sound odd, that read awkwardly, or things that I would have just kind of skipped over on the day of drafting because I knew what I meant while I was writing it. So we'll leave that the way it is, and we'll come back to it when it's time to edit. Cool. All right, so we get a little bit of a hint there about what's going on. So that's going to give us, yeah, that's going to give us our magic effect. That's going to give us our feeling, our cue to our players. And we're going to want to pepper that in, throughout the burg to kind of remind them periodically that it's a thing. But since it has a mechanical effect, we won't have to do as much as we might think, because they'll cast a spell at some point, and then they'll see the effect. So let's then turn our focus to the question of treasure. Um, Treasure is a tricky thing to work into adventures because there isn't a hard and fast way of sectioning it out. Uh, there's no rule for, hey, you've got a character that's this, your character's at this level. Really, the adventure should generate this amount of treasure for them. So they should have this amount of gold and this number of magic items of this level and da 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 da. Like there's no mechanical formula for that. There's a lot of suggestions on how to do that, but there is an art to that, and it's really going to depend a lot on your world and well, what's involved in that, right? So, for example, if you are if you hand wave things like arrows and rations and water and living expenses and all that kind of stuff, well, then gold becomes less important because the characters really only need gold then to save up for something big, and that's assuming you let them buy things like magic items. If you don't, then gold is kind of meaningless, right? So if they can't buy magic items and they've got no day-to-day expenses to spend that kind of stuff on, well, then gold is a useless reward. So in that case, you're going to want to focus exclusively on magic items, and for smaller rewards, consumables like scrolls and potions and that kind of deal. Which means that your rewards become a little bit rarer, but a little bit beefier, and you're going to end up with a party with a lot of magic items. Nothing wrong with that. Just be advised. If you are running a game where the party has got to account for everything, every time, they've got to replace their arrows, they've got to, buy healers kits, they need to pay their living expenses, they got to do all this little stuff. Well, then gold becomes a lot more important and a lot more valuable. And so in that case, putting in a lot more gold and kind of punctuating it with magic items might be a better approach. Um, when I'm writing for other people, that's how I tend to approach this, with there being an allotment of gold and then some magic items kind of littered in there as well. I have several campaigns running at the moment. One of them I play with a very kind of hand wavy, um, you know, lean towards personal expenses, and so gold doesn't have a lot of value in there. But we throw in a lot of magic items, and it's a much more chaotic madcap kind of game. And so they have a lot of magic items that they get to use, and they can do silly things with them, and sometimes they can do epic things with them, and that's one way to play. I've got another campaign running where, yeah, it is real gritty. They have to account for everything. They've got to plan out, all of their rations and yada yada yada. And so gold becomes far more valuable there. If that's the kind of game that you're playing, um, something you might consider is looking backward to what, first edition D&D, I think it is, where gold and experience points were equivalent, right? So you didn't get experience by killing monsters in first edition. You got experience by collecting treasure, right? So with one gold piece equaling one experience point. And that's kind of how all that got divvied up. Now, I'm not saying link experience specifically to gold in your game, but if you want to get kind of an idea of how much gold um, a character um, might earn per level, you could come down to the character advancement chart with the experience points in the player's handbook, and say, okay, well, between first and second level, maybe the character should get somewhere around 300 gold. Um, 900 between second and third, you know. And you could run this as cumulative because the experience points would be 2. So you could say, okay, well, actually it's 600. And then it's, you know, 900 here, actually 1800, something like that here. So, so you could use that as kind of a rule of thumb if you wanted to do that. You could also take the Adventurers League guide, which is 80 gold per level, effectively, um, and with magic items sprinkled in certain places. Or you could go over to the Dungeon Master's Guide, which is perhaps not open on here. It's on for me. And we could go to random treasure tables here. And we could use the challenge rating of particular monsters to come up with hordes. I find this tends to be a little bit of a lighter method in many ways. You get a lot more gold, a lot fewer magic. You could go to Xanathar's and go to the awarding magic items table here, where we're talking about distribution by rarity and tier, and they've got a couple options for that. If you are playing a full campaign, you're mapping this full campaign. This can be really good. This can make it really easy to make sure that everybody's getting magic items and they're getting a certain frequency of them without going overboard, without any of a situation where you've kind of overloaded or overarmed your party, which is a concern, but not necessarily a huge concern. But if you're just kind of writing an adventure for other people, I will tend to come over to the DMG version of this with the treasure hordes, and kind of play around with this a little bit. I'll roll on here and figure out what I might get, and then I'll massage those numbers as needed. So the advice on this would be that since we're thinking immediately of, what reward could the party expect from saving the town from these hags, we would use the hags challenge rating for that, right? And we were targeting challenge rating 5, I think we go. Yeah, challenge rating 4 is what I put down here, 4 or 5. Okay, so we then would come over to the random treasure and we'd use the horde, and we'd say either challenge rating 0 through 4 for this and roll, or we do the 5 through 10 if we decided to make her a 5, and kind of judge that out. Since we're gonna have other treasure in here, I think we're gonna start with this one, because there will be a separate delineation of treasure that gets littered out throughout the burg, and in this case, we're going to, and this is just kind of an allotment at the end. So we might even kind of ignore the magic items for this. But we can take average values, which in this case I think is probably what we'll do. But you could also roll. All right, so we're looking at what? 2,000 gold. Yeah, 1,050 silver, and I'm sorry, 2,100 silver copper pieces. Apologies, 1,050 silver pieces, and then 70 gold. As a reward, I would probably just convert all of that into gold. So that's 21 gold, and then 105. So let's get that calculator up again. So 21 plus 105 plus 70. Okay. That seems a little bit, we're at 196. That seems a little shallow for that. If it's just a gold reward at the end here, and we're doing this for 4 third-level characters, I'll probably try to come up with something that we can easily divide by 4. You know what? Screw it. Let's roll some dice. Okay, let's see. Let's add some chaos. Okay, so percentage die. Okay, 18 is what I got for that. So we're looking at what, 5. So 18 is going to be that 25 gold pieces. So let's say 5 times 25, which should be 125. But hey, whatever. So 321, 4 characters. Let's round that up to 400. 400 gold for saving the town. I feel low, but let's start there. Let's start there. We'll see what else we pepper in later. Um, Again, it really just depends on how much, how valuable gold is. So let's see here. So in this case, let's say, we're going to change this from reward to resolution, because this section is going to involve more than just a, you win 400 gold. So let's say resolution. Let's see. The following outline the various outcomes of the BBEG encounter. Following outline. Okay, cool. So let's see what our various outcomes here. So let's start with number 1. Let's say the characters defeat it's Briar, right? Briar Bloodgood. TBD. Let's see here. Heading. Characters are defeated by Briar Bloodgood. And then characters abandon Sky Song Gulch to its fate. TBD. Cool. Those are our 3 various outcomes, right? Because, even if the town opposes them, they still might win. Or they might lose. So, obviously, if they win, they should get rewarded. But there are negative implications for the others, right? So this is where we're going to put our treasure. Let's say if the characters defeat Briar Bloodgood, the town, we'll see, Skysong Gulch is saved from the Bloodgood sisters' manipulations, at least the time being, because hags hold grudges. Why wouldn't they? Okay. If the let's see here. The town leaders award the characters for their victory. So they should reward. I think that the reward should probably be different. Depending on whether or not they had the support of the town or not. So there's kind of 3 situations there, right? They have the support of the town, they have the the neutrality of the town, or they have the hostility of the town. If the town was hostile to them, that made for a much more difficult encounter. We probably need to give the characters a little beefier of a reward. if they had the support of the town already, they probably need a middling reward, not as big as the, I'm so sorry, uh, you know, that we tried to fight you too award. Um, but something to kind of recognize in the player's mind that they not only won the fight, but they also convinced, they kind of rallied the town because they had kind of two victories there. And rallying the town already had a mechanical benefit, so we don't need to go above and beyond with that. Um, but then, the neutrality of the town probably have a lower reward because the characters had a victory, but didn't really um, they didn't really convince the town to rally around their cause. So let's write those levels. Let's see here. Winning victory. Victory with Sky Songs support. TBD. Heading victory without Sky Songs support. And then victory despite Sky Songs opposition. TBD. Okay. So just to kind of put these in perspective for ourselves, we're going to say big, medium, small. 400 gold total, so 100 gold apiece for this level adventure feels like the bare minimum. So we're going to put this in the middle one here. If the characters defeated Briar Bloodgood without the support of the town leaders, award them a purse of 400 GP. And thanks. Because you can kind of see that, right? Like it's oh, you saved us, but you could have just as easily, sentenced us to destruction. And so it's kind of almost a begrudging thank you in many ways. All right, so with that being our minimum, let's figure out our other rail. What's our biggest? Well, let's see. Oop. Capital D. So it needs to be at least that. We could do this simply. We could double it. We could say, it could be 800, and then we make this like 600. 600 isn't easily divisible by 4, and we know we need 4 characters on this, so we could triple it. We could say, 1,200. That's not crazy, especially in a campaign that's, high in gold usage. I kind of like that. Let's see here. Especially since they had a bigger deal of this. So let's put that here, and we'll say 1,200 and thanks. Person as a combination thank you and apology. Yeah, whatever. Okay. And then that means that we can make this nice and simply 800 gold. Cool. So that kind of gives us some good levels here. It's unlikely the town would reward them with a magic item, simply because the likelihood of the town just having a bunch of magic items that they can dole out is seems narratively a little more far fetched, at least just to me. That being said, if gold isn't meaningful in your game, then yeah, sure, they've got that. The town pulls together and they all collect this purse and it's got magic items for everybody, kind of deal in there. Sure, you can do that, but I like the gold here thing, and putting the magic items in the burg, which seems more thematically appropriate since it's kind of a magically infused place. Um, and the characters are defeated by Briar Bloodgood. That's a really kind of interesting thing to me. Um, we need we need consequences for this, right? So the players could win, they could lose. That's all decided in the BBG encounter. They either succeed in their quest, or they are in their quest to protect the town, or they fail in that. And if they fail, there should be consequences to that. Now that being said, I'm not a big fan of the hag kills you and you are no more, the end kind of resolution of this. You could go that way. Um, there it's certainly something you could choose, especially if the hag wipes everybody out. But I think it's more interesting for Briar Bloodgood to, I don't want to say take control of the characters, because the players will still control them, but to maybe force them into some kind of magically binding pact, where they now have her as their patron, no matter how unwilling they are, and that she can compel them to take certain quests on, and that a next portion of this campaign might be about getting out of that pact. Um, so that could be a hook for a later adventure. Um, it could add a really cool consequence to the characters without bringing the campaign to a grinding halt. So let's put that in here. So let's say if the characters are defeated by Briar Bloodgood, she agrees to spare their lives in return for becoming her henchmen. Each character who agrees falls under the effect of a permanent Gaius, I think is how you pronounce it. Gaius? Is it Gaius? Oh, let's find out. We should look up the terms of this anyway. It's one of my favorite spells. Is it Gaius? Yes, it is. Haha. Okay, yes. Spell. So you place a magical command on a creature, yada yada yada. But effectively, you give it a command, and it takes 5d10 psychic damage each time it acts in a manner directly counter to the instructions. So it gives something like this gives the characters some room to kind of weasel out of their fate potentially, and but some consequences for directly just ignoring the hag. So it puts them under under a permanent Gaius spell. No saving throw. While under the effects of this enchantment, I think it's an enchantment. Anyway, any of the it wouldn't be any of that. Say Briar Bloodgood. Briar Bloodgood can issue commands that must be commands to the characters as if a new casting of a spell. And we'll clean up the language on that. But effectively, they're permanently under Gaius, and she can just issue a new command, and it takes effect. And we've already got kind of the damage consequences on that. But we could say this pact can only be ended by a wish spell or similar magic. So by putting in a termination condition in there, we give the characters a goal now. They need to find somebody who can break this. And by making it a sufficiently powerful spell, and you could change it if you want, but making a sufficiently powerful spell means that they probably need to do something big to get this reward from someone. And by using this, we give ourselves some guidelines that, Briar Bloodgood issues a command, and as long as the players don't contradict that command, they can weave around the verbiage of it, maybe giving themselves some wiggle room, some places to interpret her will in such a way that is more agreeable to them. And she doesn't have to use them all the time. She can, not have a use for them for a couple adventures and then come back. So it becomes kind of a cool lever here without a TPK, which is always unsatisfying. And if the characters abandon Skysong Gulch to its fate, something needs to happen to Skysong Gulch. Something that makes that place a danger in the region. I'll have to think about that one a little bit. I could see them becoming like maybe the Bloodgood sisters move their coven there, and so now it becomes a hag's town, full of these minions who have to do her bidding. That one subjects the people of Skysong Gulch to this effectively slavery under the hags, which would have permeating effects throughout the region, right? So one, we'd probably see some physical effects as the weird magic that hags begins to corrupt this area here, but it would also probably cause problems for all of the other settlements in this area here. And so we'd have to define that in some capacity. That's something that it's easier to define if you're kind of running a full campaign, you know what everything's around it. But we'll figure out a way to write this without knowing that too. Probably just not today. I'll have to chew on that. What we might end up doing is going to Volu's guide, actually, to get an idea of maybe some of the layer effects that might permeate the region with this, because they got a whole section on hags. And I know that it's legacy content, and it they really aren't the stat blocks you should be using, because the ones from Mordenkainen's Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse are far more balanced. But it gives really good contextual information, some really good ideas. So I go back to Volos quite a bit for some inspiration on that kind of stuff. So maybe we'll look at that at a later time. But for now, I think we're going to put a pin in this. So next time, let's see. We could spend some time filling up rooms here next time, sprinkling out some treasure. But to be completely honest, I'm kind of feeling work on the map for this. So let's do that. Let's plan on next time. We're gonna jump into Krita. That's gonna be our digital art software they're gonna use for this. It's free, so I'll explain where to download it and how to follow along next time we get here. But we'll sketch out a map for the Berg, and we'll start kind of figuring out how these rooms fit together, and then we'll jump back in and we'll start filling them out. We've got the key points, so we've got enough to kind of start drawing this out. But yeah, yeah, it might give us some inspiration on what to fit in where and how things connect and what sort of issues can pop up as we fill out the rest of the bird. Fantastic. So, with that being said, thank you so much for joining me today. If you've been enjoying this, please like and subscribe, hit the bell icon so you never miss a video. We will continue this series next week with section with part 15, conveniently falling on the 15th of June. If you're watching this in real time, almost like I planned it. Um, that being said, in the meantime, if you'd like to see some of the adventures that I have been writing, so you can see what I use this for to create, you can check out my website. That's rjkerr, just like my name is spelled here, .com. And I've got a whole page devoted to D&D and TTRPG content that you can download adventures from the DMs Guild here. You can get my adventure notes book and check out all my latest content here. One last note for you. I got something kind of cool, and that is I got the D&D Lego set. And I think it would be really fun to build this on a live stream with you guys. I thought it would be even more fun to do this as as kind of a Q&A. So it's a big set. It'll probably take us a few live streams to kind of work our way through it, so it's not completely unwieldy. But I would love to hear what questions you guys have about D&D and writing D&D adventures or TTRPG content in general. If you want to ask about me, I'm not terribly interesting, but I will answer those questions too. But whatever questions you might have, please send it to me. Drop in the comments to this video, or frankly in any of my other videos, and I'll make a list of those and we'll answer them on the live stream for that. That'll be a special live stream that won't replace this one. Anyway, that's my ramble and my shameless self-promoting plugs. So thank you again for joining me. Again, I'm RJ Kerr, and this has been Let's Write an Adventure. I will see you next Saturday.